A boy lived on the streets for 17 years until he found out his brother was growing up in luxury. The revelation changed everything. Watch to the end to find out the truth. Subscribe and write in the comments what city you are from. The wind cut through the streets of Atlanta like a sharpened blade, weaving its way through alleys and under bridges, wrapping itself around those who had nowhere else to go. The December air was thick with the scent of the city, exhaust fumes, damp concrete, and the distant, mouth-watering aroma of food drifting from upscale restaurants. But for Umar, the night carried a different scent: survival. 17 years old and already hardened by the streets, Umar had long since learned that warmth was a luxury. His home was wherever he could find shelter: a doorway when it wasn't too windy, the back of an abandoned car when luck was on his side. His possessions consisted of a worn-out backpack with a tattered blanket, a couple of shirts he had scavenged, and a water bottle he refilled when he could. He had stopped wondering how he got here a long time ago. The past was nothing but a foggy recollection of moving from one foster home to another, each one colder than the last. The system had never worked in his favor, and when he was old enough to question why no one had ever come looking for him, he had already learned that asking questions didn't change anything. It was easier to survive in silence. That night, he pulled his jacket closer around himself, stuffing his hands into his sleeves, and kept moving. Standing still for too long made him a target, whether for cops looking to clear the streets or for other desperate souls willing to fight for a stolen coat. His stomach gnawed at him, reminding him he hadn't eaten since the day before. Maybe he'd find something in the trash behind a cafe if he was lucky. As he turned onto Peachtree Street, the heart of downtown's wealth, he slowed his pace. This was a dangerous place for someone like him. Too many people in tailored coats and polished shoes glanced in his direction with thinly veiled disgust, like he was a blemish on their perfect world. A security guard outside a designer store gave him a warning look, hand twitching near his radio. Umar kept walking, head down. The glow of Christmas lights shimmered against the towering glass buildings, their reflections turning the cold sidewalks into a kaleidoscope of red, green, and gold. Storefronts boasted extravagant holiday displays, luxurious watches, silk scarves draped over mannequins, diamonds twinkling under artificial light. The city was alive with festive cheer, but Umar wasn't a part of it. He was invisible. Then he saw the restaurant. The floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a world so far removed from his own that it felt surreal. Inside, laughter bubbled through the air, glasses clinked, and waiters in crisp uniforms wove between tables with plates of steaming food. Umar's stomach clenched involuntarily, his gaze locking onto the plates for just a moment, too long before flickering upward. That was when he saw him. At first, he thought it was a trick of the glass. Maybe his reflection, distorted by the warm glow of the chandeliers and the soft flicker of candlelight. But the more he stared, the more his pulse began to hammer in his chest. The boy sitting at the table was him, not just similar, identical. The same sharp jawline, the same deep brown skin, the same dark eyes that reflected more than they revealed. His hair was neatly trimmed, unlike Umar's unruly curls, and he wore a tailored sweater that looked like it cost more than everything Umar had ever owned combined. His posture was relaxed, confident. He was laughing at something, turning toward the two people at his table, a man and a woman who, by the way they spoke to him, could only be his parents. Umar's hands curled into fists inside his sleeves. He couldn't move. His mind raced through possibilities. A hallucination? Maybe he was more exhausted than he realized. But no, people around the boy acknowledged him. The woman beside him, elegant in a silk dress, touched his arm as she spoke. The man, sharply dressed and dignified, nodded at something he said. This wasn't a mirage. His heart pounded against his ribs as a rush of emotions swirled inside him. Confusion, anger, something close to betrayal but with no clear direction. Who was this boy? Why did he look exactly like him? And why was he sitting there, surrounded by luxury, while Umar stood outside in the freezing night, starving? He forced himself to take a step back, his breathing unsteady. A dozen thoughts collided in his head, but one thing was clear. This was not a coincidence. He needed to find out who that boy was. And more than that, he needed to know why their lives had taken such different paths. The morning light filtered through the expansive windows of the bank's residence, casting golden streaks across the pristine white walls and polished hardwood floors. The house, a modern architectural masterpiece in one of Atlanta's wealthiest neighborhoods, stood in stark contrast to the city's colder, less forgiving streets. Inside, everything was curated to perfection. Every piece of furniture, every detail meticulously placed. It was the kind of home that exuded success, stability, and wealth. Elijah Banks woke up to the soft chime of his alarm, stretching lazily in his king-size bed. His mornings followed a strict routine, one that had been ingrained in him for years. Wake up, train in the private gym downstairs, shower, and have breakfast with his parents before heading to school. His life was structured, predictable, and paved with expectations. As he stepped into the shower, warm water cascading over his skin, his mind wandered back to the night before. The evening had been pleasant. His parents had taken him to one of their favorite restaurants, a place where servers knew their names and greeted them like family. He had eaten well, laughed at his mother's teasing remarks, and listened to his father talk about business with an ease that Elijah had always admired. But something had unsettled him. A feeling. A strange, nagging sensation that had refused to leave him since they left the restaurant. It wasn't until he was toweling off, staring at himself in the mirror, that he pinpointed exactly what it was. The boy outside. Elijah frowned, gripping the edge of the sink. He had only seen him for a second, just a brief moment as they exited the restaurant, but the image was burned into his mind. The boy had been standing across the street, partially hidden in the shadows, staring directly at him, and not just looking, watching, almost as if he had seen something shocking. The oddest part, he had looked exactly like Elijah. Elijah shook his head, dismissing the thought. It had to be some kind of mistake. Maybe just a resemblance. People always said there were doppelgangers in the world, but as he dressed, pulling on his neatly pressed uniform for his private school, the feeling persisted. At breakfast, his parents were already seated at the marble dining table, discussing the week ahead. His mother, Veronica Banks, was poised as always, her silk blouse pristine, her jewelry understated yet impossibly expensive. His father, Charles Banks, was the very image of power and composure, sipping his black coffee while scanning something on his tablet. "Elijah," his mother greeted, smiling. "Good morning, darling. Did you sleep well?" He nodded, sliding into his chair as their housekeeper placed a plate of fruit and eggs in front of him. "Yeah." "You're quiet," his father observed, barely looking up from his tablet. "Something on your mind?" Elijah hesitated. Normally, he wouldn't think twice before dismissing such a question. His life was comfortable, smooth, free of the chaos that troubled other teenagers. But something about last night's encounter gnawed at him. There was this guy outside the restaurant last night. He kept his voice neutral, carefully choosing his words. He looked exactly like me. That got their attention. His mother's fork paused midair, her expression unreadable. His father, however, didn't react at all. "Exactly like you?" Veronica asked, her voice light but with an edge of something deeper beneath it. "Yeah, same face, same skin, same everything. He was just—" Elijah hesitated. "Different." His mother exchanged a glance with his father. It was quick, barely noticeable, but Elijah caught it. His father sighed and set his tablet down. "It's probably just a coincidence. People resemble each other all the time." Elijah frowned. His father's voice was firm, as if shutting down the conversation before it could go any further. But his mother's silence was more telling. Something wasn't right. "Did I ever have a brother?" Elijah asked suddenly. His mother stiffened. His father's expression remained impassive. "Elijah," his father began, his tone measured, "where is this coming from?" "I don't know." He leaned forward slightly. It's weird, right? I mean, I've never thought about it before, but what if—" His mother abruptly stood up, pushing her chair back slightly. "I need some air." Elijah's stomach tightened. His father exhaled sharply. "Elijah, listen to me." His voice was calmer now, but there was something else in it, a finality. "You don't have a brother. You never did." But Elijah didn't believe him. Not after that glance his parents had exchanged, not after the way his mother had left the room, and certainly not after what he had seen last night. After breakfast, as his father left for work, Elijah made his way to his parents' study. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, only that his gut told him he needed answers. His family kept meticulous records, business documents, property deeds, even medical files. Everything was in perfect order, stored in a sleek filing system. His fingers trailed over the labels until he found what he was searching for: birth records. His hands were steady as he pulled the file from the cabinet and flipped it open. And then he saw it. His name, Elijah Banks. And below it, another name, Umar Banks. Elijah's breath caught in his throat. His vision blurred for a second as he stared at the name. His hands tightened around the paper, his pulse hammering in his ears. He had a brother. He had a twin, and his parents had never told him. His mind raced. If they had hidden this from him, then what else were they keeping secret? And more importantly, why? The face outside the restaurant wasn't just a resemblance. It was family. And now Elijah needed to know the truth. Elijah couldn't shake the weight of the discovery. The name Umar Banks was burned into his mind, a silent echo that followed him through the day. At school, he found himself drifting through classes, unable to focus, his thoughts tangled in a loop of questions. Every explanation he tried to come up with fell apart under its own contradictions. His parents had lied to him, not just omitted the truth or forgotten to mention something, they had deliberately kept this from him. Why? What possible reason could they have had for separating him from his twin brother? By the time school ended, his resolve was firm. He needed to find Umar. It wasn't hard. Atlanta was big, but the streets had a way of keeping people in their place. The wealthy stayed in their polished neighborhoods, behind security gates and luxury cars. The forgotten, like Umar, lived in the shadows, moving between shelters and alleyways, unseen by those who didn't want to see them. Elijah spent the evening searching downtown, his stomach tight with nerves. The city was a different world at night, less glamorous, more unpredictable. The polished sidewalks of his usual routes gave way to cracked pavement and graffiti-stained walls. The scent of car exhaust, old trash, and something acrid filled the air. He ignored the uneasy stares from people who could tell he didn't belong here. Then he saw him. Umar was sitting near an old convenience store, back against the wall, his arms crossed tightly over his chest as if trying to block out the cold. His expression was guarded, his face partially hidden beneath the hood of his jacket. But there was no mistaking it. Elijah was looking at himself. His chest tightened. He had spent his whole life looking in mirrors, but this was something different. Seeing Umar felt like standing outside of his own body, like watching an alternate version of himself shaped by a completely different world. Elijah stepped closer, his heart pounding. Umar's eyes flickered to him, instantly alert, his body tensed as if expecting trouble. "Hey," Elijah said, his voice careful, steady. Umar didn't respond immediately. His gaze swept over Elijah's clothes, the expensive coat, the designer shoes. "You lost?" Umar finally said, his tone flat. "No." Elijah swallowed. "I was looking for you." That caught Umar's attention. His posture stiffened slightly. "You don't know me," he said. Elijah exhaled. "Actually, I think I do." He hesitated, then pulled the folded paper from his jacket, the birth record. He had stared at it so many times now that he had practically memorized every word. He handed it to Umar. For a moment, Umar didn't move. Then, slowly, he took the paper, his fingers rough against the smooth texture. His eyes scanned the words, his expression unreadable. But when he got to the name, Umar Banks, his jaw clenched. He stared at it for a long time. Then, without a word, he crumpled the paper and tossed it to the ground. Elijah's chest tightened. "Why did you do that?" "Because I don't need it," Umar said sharply. "I already know who I am." Elijah's heart pounded. "You knew?" Umar looked at him, something dark and cold flickering in his expression. "I didn't have a name for you, but yeah. I've always known there was someone else." He glanced away, his jaw tightening. "You think I never noticed that something was missing? That I never wondered why I didn't fit anywhere?" Elijah tried to process what he was hearing. Umar had known? Had felt it, even without proof? "How?" Elijah asked quietly. Umar let out a short, humorless laugh. "You don't need birth records to know when you've been abandoned." Elijah flinched. "That's not what happened." Umar's eyes snapped to his, sharp and unyielding. "Then tell me," he said. "Tell me what happened." Elijah hesitated. His throat felt tight. "I don't know yet." Umar scoffed. "Figures." Elijah exhaled, forcing himself to stay calm. "I want to find out," he said. "I want to know why they lied." For the first time, something flickered in Umar's eyes. Hesitation, maybe. Uncertainty. He had spent so long carrying the weight of his past alone that the idea of sharing it, of someone else wanting answers, was unfamiliar territory. Elijah took a slow step forward. "Let me help." Umar's gaze locked onto his, measuring him. "Why?" Elijah hesitated. He had asked himself the same thing. Why did this matter so much to him? Why did he feel this overwhelming need to fix this? "Because you should have been there," he admitted. "You should have grown up with me. We should have had the same life, but something took that from us, and I don't think that's fair." Silence stretched between them. Then, finally, Umar exhaled, running a hand over his face. "Fine," he muttered. "But I swear, if this is some kind of game to you—" "It's not," Elijah said firmly. "I promise." Umar didn't respond right away, but after a long pause, he gave a short nod. Elijah felt something shift between them, a fragile, unspoken truce. Now they just had to find the truth. Elijah went home that night with the weight of the conversation still heavy on his mind. He barely heard his parents when they greeted him, barely tasted his dinner. His mind was racing, piecing together everything he had learned. When his mother kissed his forehead before heading upstairs, he caught the hesitation in her movements. She knew something. He was sure of it now. So instead of going to bed, Elijah waited until the house was silent. Then he made his way back to the study, heart pounding as he reopened the files. This time, he searched deeper, through medical bills, through discharge papers. Then he found it. A signature. Dr. Harold Green. The name meant nothing to him, but something about it felt wrong. He grabbed his phone and quickly searched the name. His stomach twisted as articles popped up. Dr. Harold Green, once a respected physician, had been involved in several adoption scandals in the past. There were allegations, none proven, of him working with private agencies, illegally arranging adoptions by falsifying medical records. Elijah's blood ran cold. His parents had said Umar was sick when they were born. Had they lied? Or had someone lied to them? He needed to confront them. But first, he needed to gather more proof. And he knew exactly who could help. He grabbed his phone and texted Umar, "Meet me tomorrow. I found something." Seconds later, a reply came through. "I'm listening." Elijah barely slept that night. His mind raced with questions, possibilities, and the growing certainty that his parents had been deceived just as much as he had. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the glow of his phone screen illuminating his face as he scrolled through articles about Dr. Harold Green. Case after case described eerily similar stories. Families told that their newborns were too sick to survive, only for those children to be placed into illegal adoptions. Some had been reunited with their biological families years later, but most had vanished into the system, lost in a bureaucratic maze of falsified paperwork and broken promises. At some point, exhaustion overtook him, but when he awoke, it was with a renewed determination. This wasn't just about uncovering a family secret anymore. It was about justice. Someone had taken his brother's life and rewritten it. Someone had decided that Umar wasn't worthy of the life that Elijah had been given, and Elijah wasn't going to let them get away with it. By the time he arrived at their meeting spot downtown, Umar was already there, leaning against the brick wall of a boarded-up convenience store. His posture was guarded, arms crossed over his chest, but there was something in his eyes. Curiosity, or maybe just the faintest sliver of hope. Elijah took a deep breath, steadying himself. "I found something," he said, keeping his voice level. Umar pushed off the wall, tilting his head slightly. "Yeah?" Elijah hesitated for only a moment before pulling out his phone and showing him the articles. Dr. Harold Green, the guy who signed your birth records. He's been involved in adoption scandals before. Families were told their kids died or were too sick to survive, but those kids were taken and sold to other families. Umar took the phone, scrolling through the pages, his expression unreadable. But Elijah saw the way his fingers tightened around the device, the way his jaw clenched slightly. "So what?" Umar finally said, his voice quieter than before. "Even if this is true, what are we supposed to do about it? The guy's probably long gone." Elijah shook his head. "He's still alive, retired, living in some suburb outside the city." He hesitated before adding, "And I think my parents were lied to too. They thought you were sick, that's what they were told." Umar scoffed, handing the phone back. "And you believe them?" Elijah met his gaze, steady and unwavering. I don't know, but I need to find out. And so do you. Umar let out a slow breath, rubbing a hand over his face. All right, fine. Let's say you're right. What's the plan? Elijah had thought about that. First, I need to talk to my parents again, get them to tell me exactly what they remember. If we're lucky, they still have medical records, something we can use. Umar didn't respond right away. He looked away, his expression tight, as if he was trying to hold back something too painful to say aloud. Finally, he nodded. Okay, but I'm coming with you. Elijah hesitated, then nodded. Okay. That evening, Elijah walked into his home with Umar at his side. The contrast between them had never felt so stark. Elijah, in his school uniform, his polished shoes clicking softly against the marble floor, while Umar, dressed in a worn hoodie and scuffed sneakers, moved like someone who was always prepared to be thrown out. His parents were in the living room, his mother curled up on the couch with a book, his father sipping whiskey by the fireplace. When they saw Elijah enter with Umar, the change in the air was immediate. His mother set the book down, her lips parting slightly in surprise. His father's grip on the glass tightened. Elijah, his father said carefully, what's going on? Elijah swallowed. His heart was pounding, but he kept his voice steady. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. His mother sat up straighter. Of course, darling. What is it? Elijah glanced at Umar, then back at them. It's about him. His mother's eyes flickered to Umar for only a second before returning to Elijah. Her expression was composed, but there was something beneath it, anxiety, maybe even guilt. His father remained silent, watching them both with unreadable intensity. I know the truth, Elijah continued. I know about Dr. Harold Green. I know about the adoption scandals. And I know that Umar and I were never supposed to be separated. His mother inhaled sharply. His father's expression darkened. Elijah, his father started, but he wasn't going to let them derail him this time. Don't tell me this is a coincidence, Elijah said, his voice harder now. I found our birth records. I found his name, Umar Banks. So I need you to tell me everything, right now. Silence filled the room. Then, finally, his mother spoke, her voice trembling. When you were born, she said, the doctor told us you had a twin, but that he... She swallowed, looking down at her hands. That he wouldn't survive. Elijah's breath caught. The doctor told us there were complications, she continued, that the best thing we could do was let him go, that it would be too painful to hold on. We trusted him. We believed him. Her voice broke slightly. If we had known... She covered her mouth, shaking her head. His father, who had remained quiet until now, finally spoke. His voice was low, controlled. We were deceived. We didn't know you were alive, Umar. We would have never... But Umar cut him off. You didn't even question it? His voice was tight, his fists clenched at his sides. You just accepted that your own son was gone? His father exhaled slowly. We were devastated. We did what we thought was best at the time, but we were wrong. Elijah barely heard him. His mother's words kept replaying in his head. The best thing we could do was let him go. Someone had made that decision for them. Someone had stolen Umar's life and rewritten it. Dr. Harold Green. Elijah straightened, his resolve hardening. Then we have to do something about it. His father's gaze sharpened. What do you mean? I mean, Elijah said, we need to find Dr. Green. We need to make him answer for what he did. His father stared at him for a long moment. Then, to Elijah's surprise, he nodded. I have contacts, he said, people who can track him down. If you want answers, we'll get them." Elijah turned to Umar, expecting hesitation, but Umar's eyes burned with something raw, something that had been buried for years. "Let's do it," Umar said. For the first time in his life, Elijah felt like they were on the same side. And for the first time in his life, Umar wasn't fighting alone. Umar had never known what it meant to have a home. The streets of Atlanta had been his world for so long that the idea of living anywhere else felt strange, almost suffocating. Yet here he was, standing in a bedroom that wasn't his, in a house that was far too big, surrounded by a family that wasn't quite his yet. The Banks' residence was nothing like the places he had slept before. It was pristine, expansive, every surface polished to a gleam. The bed was impossibly soft, the sheets freshly scented. The closet was filled with clothes that weren't his, but which had been bought for him nonetheless. Someone had even left a pair of new sneakers by the door. It felt wrong. Not because it wasn't nice, if anything, it was too nice. Too much, too unfamiliar. He had spent his life making do with as little as possible. And now he was in a house where a single chandelier probably cost more than everything he had ever owned combined. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, his hands gripping his knees. His body was tense, waiting for the moment someone would tell him this was a mistake, that he didn't belong, because he didn't. Not really. A knock at the door made him look up. A second later it opened, and Elijah stepped inside. He was holding something, 2 mugs of hot chocolate, steam curling up from the surface. He handed one to Umar without a word before sitting on the opposite end of the bed. Umar took the mug but didn't drink. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken thoughts. "How's it feel?" Elijah finally asked. Umar let out a breath through his nose. "Weird." Elijah gave a short nod. "Yeah, I figured." He took a sip of his drink before glancing sideways at him. "You know, you don't have to act like you're in enemy territory. No one's going to kick you out." Umar's grip on the mug tightened. "Yeah? Give it time." Elijah frowned. "Why would you think that?" "Because this isn't my world," Umar said, gesturing vaguely at the room, at the luxury around him. "You grew up with this. I didn't. You think that just because I sleep in a real bed for a few nights, I'm suddenly part of this life?" He shook his head, his jaw tightening. "I don't even know what I'm supposed to do here." Elijah was quiet for a moment, considering. Then he said, "You don't have to do anything." Umar scoffed. "That's easy for you to say." "No, it's not," Elijah admitted. "This is new for me, too. Having a brother, having you here." He let out a small laugh, almost self-conscious. "I don't know what I'm doing either, but I do know that you're not alone in this." Umar looked at him then, studying him in the dim light. There was no pity in Elijah's expression, no judgment, just understanding. It was unsettling. Umar exhaled, shaking his head. "I don't know if I can do this." Elijah leaned back against the headboard, staring up at the ceiling. "Then don't. Just take it a day at a time." Umar was silent, his fingers tapping lightly against the ceramic of the mug. He wanted to believe Elijah, to trust that things could be different. But trust had never been something he could afford. Still, for the first time in a long time, he wasn't alone. And maybe that was enough. The next morning, the house smelled like cinnamon and coffee. Umar hesitated at the top of the staircase, unsure whether he was supposed to go downstairs. But then Elijah appeared, motioning for him to follow. The kitchen was warm, sunlight spilling in through the tall windows. Christine Banks was at the stove, flipping pancakes, while Charles read the newspaper at the dining table. The scene looked like something out of a movie. Too perfect, too normal. Umar felt like an intruder just standing there. Christine turned when she saw them, offering a soft smile. "Good morning, boys. Umar, I hope you're hungry." Umar hesitated. He didn't know how to do this. He had never sat down to breakfast with a family before. The idea of eating in a kitchen instead of hurriedly scarfing down whatever he could find felt foreign. "Yeah," he said finally, shifting his weight. "I guess." Christine's smile didn't waver. "Good. Sit down. I'll get you a plate." Elijah sat first, making it seem effortless. Umar followed, feeling stiff and uncertain. Christine placed a stack of pancakes in front of him along with a glass of orange juice. He stared at the plate for a second. "How do you like them?" Christine asked. Umar glanced up. "What?" "Your pancakes," she said gently. "Do you like syrup? Butter?" Umar hesitated. No one had ever asked him how he liked his food before. Syrup, I guess." Christine nodded, drizzling some on top before setting the bottle down. "There you go." Umar muttered a quiet thanks before picking up his fork. He took a bite, and it was good. Better than anything he had eaten in a long time. Across the table, Charles set his newspaper down. His gaze was steady, unreadable. "I understand if this adjustment isn't easy for you," he said, "but you should know that you're not here out of pity. We want you here, Umar." Umar swallowed, keeping his expression neutral. He didn't know what to say to that. Christine reached across the table, her touch light as she placed a hand over his. "You don't have to believe us yet, but we'll prove it to you." Umar met her gaze, something unfamiliar twisting in his chest. A part of him wanted to pull away, to reject whatever kindness they were offering before it could be taken from him. But another part, one buried so deep he barely recognized it, wanted to believe them. Over the next few days, Umar tried to adjust. It wasn't easy. The house felt too big, too quiet. He wasn't used to having a room of his own, to sleep in without fear of being woken up in the middle of the night. He found himself moving cautiously, half expecting someone to change their mind and send him back to the streets. But no one did. Elijah kept him company, showing him around, introducing him to small comforts he had never considered. Christine checked in on him without smothering him. Charles didn't say much, but when he did, it was always firm and steady, and slowly, hesitantly, Umar began to let his guard down. One evening, Elijah dragged him to the backyard. The air was cool, the sky stretching wide and open above them. "I used to play out here all the time as a kid," Elijah said, glancing at him. "Guess I still do, sometimes." Umar stuffed his hands into his pockets. "Yeah?" Elijah nodded. "It's big enough for the both of us now." Umar huffed a quiet laugh. He still wasn't sure where he fit in this world, still didn't know if he would ever belong. But for the first time in his life, he felt like he might have a chance. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The morning air was crisp as Elijah drove through the quiet suburban streets, his hands gripping the wheel tighter than necessary. Umar sat beside him, staring out the window, his expression unreadable. They were on their way to confront the man who had stolen their lives, and the weight of what they were about to do hung heavy in the air. Dr. Harold Green's house was modest compared to the bank's estate, a single-story home with an overgrown lawn and faded shutters. It was the kind of place that might have once belonged to a respectable man, but now seemed tired, forgotten. Elijah parked across the street and exhaled slowly. "You ready?" Umar didn't look at him. "I've been ready my whole life." They stepped out of the car, moving with quiet determination toward the front door. Elijah knocked, his heartbeat a steady drum in his chest. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then the door creaked open, revealing an older man with thinning gray hair and wary eyes. Dr. Green. He didn't recognize them at first. His gaze swept over them with the polite detachment of someone accustomed to ignoring the problems of others. "Can I help you?" Umar took a step forward. "You stole my life." Recognition flickered in Dr. Green's eyes, followed quickly by something else. Fear. Elijah stepped in before the man could shut the door. "We know what you did," he said, his voice steady but sharp. "We know about the fake medical records, the adoptions, the families you lied to." Dr. Green hesitated, his grip on the door tightening. I don't know what you're talking about." Umar scoffed. "Don't play dumb. You told my parents I was too sick to live. You sold me into the system while my brother got to grow up in a mansion." His voice shook slightly, but his anger held firm. "You ruined my life." The doctor swallowed, shifting on his feet. "That was a long time ago," he muttered. "Things were different then." Elijah's jaw clenched. "Different? You stole children." Dr. Green rubbed a hand over his face. He looked smaller now, weaker. "I had debts," he admitted. "I was desperate. Those agencies, they paid well. And the families, they never knew. That doesn't make it right," Umar snapped. "You didn't just take me from my parents, you threw me away. Do you have any idea what it's like to grow up knowing no one wants you?" Dr. Green's mouth opened, but no words came out. He knew there was nothing he could say to justify what he had done. Elijah took a slow breath. "We're going public with this." He held up his phone where a voice recording app had been running the entire time. "The truth is coming out. You won't be able to hide." The doctor sagged against the doorframe, his face ashen. He knew it was over. Elijah turned to Umar. "Are you ready to go?" Umar hesitated. He had spent years dreaming of this moment, of confronting the man who had stolen everything from him. He had thought it would feel like victory, but now, looking at the broken old man in front of him, he just felt tired. Finally, he nodded. "Yeah, I'm done here." They left Dr. Green standing in the doorway, the weight of his sins pressing down on him. The story broke the next day. The Banks family had called in their legal team, and within hours, reporters were digging into Dr. Green's past. More families came forward, sharing similar stories of deception and loss. The truth spread like wildfire, and soon authorities stepped in. Dr. Green was arrested. Umar watched the news coverage from the Banks' living room, his arms crossed as he listened to the charges being read: fraud, kidnapping, illegal adoption schemes. The list went on. Christine sat beside him, her expression unreadable. "Does this help?" she asked softly. Umar didn't answer right away. "It doesn't change what happened," he admitted, "but at least he won't be able to do it to anyone else." She nodded. "That's something." Elijah entered the room, tossing a bag of chips onto the coffee table. "So," he said, flopping onto the couch, "now that we've taken down an international adoption criminal, what's next?" Umar let out a short laugh. It was the first time he had laughed in days, and it surprised even him. "I don't know," he admitted. Elijah grinned. "That's okay. We'll figure it out." Weeks passed, and slowly Umar began to adjust. The Banks house no longer felt like a hotel he was crashing at. It still wasn't quite home, but it wasn't a cage either. He started to let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he belonged. Christine and Charles gave him space, but they also made it clear that they wanted him there. Elijah treated him like he had always been part of the family, never forcing anything but never letting Umar pull away completely. One evening, Elijah found him in the backyard, staring up at the sky. "Thinking about leaving?" Elijah asked, leaning against the railing. Umar exhaled. "I used to think that was my only option." "And now?" Umar glanced at him, then back at the sky. "Now, I don't know." Elijah smirked. "Well, that's an improvement." Umar rolled his eyes but didn't argue. They stood in silence for a while, the night air cool against their skin. "I don't know if I'll ever be like you," Umar admitted quietly. Elijah shrugged. "Good. The world doesn't need two of me." Umar snorted, shaking his head. Elijah nudged him. "But for real? You don't have to be anyone but yourself. That's kind of the point." Umar didn't answer, but something in his chest loosened. Maybe he didn't have all the answers yet. Maybe he didn't know where he was going. But for the first time, he wasn't going alone. And for now, that was enough. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss another one. Don't forget to share this video with your friends and family so they can enjoy it too. And if you're ready for more, check out our next video or explore our channel for even more incredible stories. See you in the next one.